Did you know that the first government shutdown happened in 1976? Gerald Ford was president. Ford vetoed a bill for health, education, labor, and welfare. And the Democratic majority in Congress thought the veto was politically motivated, so they planned to override the veto. Now, the timing between Ford's veto and the override caused a government funding lapse of 11 days. So technically, the government was shut down, but no employees were furloughed or laid off or any other bad stuff. What we would call a government shutdown, where the government was closed and employees were furloughed, happened under Ronald Reagan in 1981. Reagan vetoed a funding bill because he didn't think it cut domestic programs enough, and 241,000 workers were furloughed. That shutdown lasted, some say 2 days, some say 1 day. Technically, it's one full day into two. But that was what we would call the first modern government shutdown. Of the 21 shutdowns in the last 50 years, 8 of them came from Ronald Reagan. 5 of them came from Jimmy Carter. But again, all those pre 1981 shutdowns really weren't shutdowns and workers were not furloughed. Barack Obama had 2 that are in his name, but they were caused by Republicans in Congress. And Donald Trump had 2. The most infamous one being the most recent one in 2019, where he caused a shutdown because Congress would not give him funding for his border wall. Given this history and background, the situation that we find ourselves in today is fairly unprecedented. Democrats met with Donald Trump at the White House. Hakeem Jeffries, Chuck Schumer, Republicans John Thune, and Mike Johnson were in attendance. JD Vance was also there with Trump. Now, coming out of the meeting, it was clear that it did not go well. It was amazingly clear it did not go well. Democrats sat there and said, we have massive major differences. Now, what Democrats want, contrary to what the administration is claiming, what Democrats want is a permanent funding of Obamacare subsidies to avoid massive premium increases on tens of millions of customers, Americans. And they are Americans because people who are not American citizens do not have access to the Affordable Care Act. It is illegal for non-citizens to have access to the Affordable Care Act and subsidies. The Affordable Care Act is a federal program. I saw some Trump supporters trying to argue with me that California and New York give health care to, quote, illegal aliens. The problem is it's not under Obamacare. It's not under subsidies. The ACA, the Affordable Care Act, is a federal program. It's overseen by the federal government. States cannot provide subsidies to illegal aliens. After the meeting, which was a disaster and a fiasco, JD Vance came out with Ross Voigt, OMB director, Mike Johnson, House Speaker, and Senate Majority Leader John Thune. Let's take a look at what good old JD had to say. By the way, JD is not his real name.
Well, good afternoon, everybody. We just had a very frank conversation with the Senate and House Democratic leadership. Look, the principle at stake here is very simple. We have disagreements about tax policy, but you don't shut that government down.
This is not tax policy. This is more than 20 million Americans. And by the way, those are just people on the ACA that are going to face higher premiums. Everyone is going to face higher premiums. It doesn't matter if you get your insurance from your employer or where you get your insurance from. We're all part of the same pool. We are all run by the same insurance companies. We're all going to face higher premiums. If the premiums go up on the ACA and let's say fewer people can keep their health insurance on roll, that's going to trickle down into private insurance. The premiums are already scheduled to go up on private insurance. Everyone is facing a premium increase if these subsidies go away.
We have disagreements about healthcare policy, but you don't shut the government down. You don't use your policy.
Okay. This is important. He says you don't shut the government down. All right. The problem is these notices of premium increases are going on in days, and Republicans have ignored for months the opportunity to prevent this from happening. So Democrats aren't doing anything unreasonable here. This is a crisis moment for tens of millions of people, and I'm going to guess more like hundreds of millions of people who are going to see their premiums go up.
Disagreements as leverage to not pay our troops, to not have essential services of government actually function. You don't say the fact that you disagree about a particular tax provision is an excuse.
It's not a tax provision. Not a tax provision. What he's talking about is health insurance premiums. See, Vance is simply lying.
For shutting down the people's government and all the essential services that come along with it. If you look at what Chuck Schumer has said in the past consistently, it's whatever our disagreements are, let's negotiate with them. Let's talk about them. Let's figure out a bipartisan solution.
Democrats have been trying to negotiate on this for 4 months. Republicans refuse to talk to them.
But you don't shut the government down. In other words, you don't put a gun to the American people's head and say, unless you do.
Interesting that a guy who just had his quote-unquote best friend murdered with a gun weeks ago is now using a metaphor about putting a gun to somebody's head.
House Democrats want you to do, we're going to shut down your government. That's exactly what they're...
That's not it at all. That's not it at all. This is not a hostage ransom situation. Usually, government funding agreements are made in a bipartisan way. Republicans decided, because Trump told them to, they didn't have to talk to Democrats. Unfortunately, somebody at the White House can't count because they need Democratic votes in the Senate to pass any funding bill. So this isn't about somebody making an unreasonable demand. This is about coming to a bipartisan consensus on how to fund the government.
Proposing out there. Now we have to remember they're very frustrated. They say that they're very frustrated about the fact that this negotiation has not taken place until today. But if you look at the original thing they did with this negotiation, it was a $1.5 trillion spending package, basically saying to the American people, we want to give massive amounts of money, hundreds of billions of dollars to illegal aliens for their health care.
That's bullshit. That is 100% bullshit. He is making that up. The whole right has made that up. Again, the Affordable Care Act. This is about Obamacare subsidies. The ACA is not open to non-citizens. I cannot make this clear enough. It is federal law. Vance knows this. He's lying. The Trump administration is just retreating to their usual blaming immigrants and trying to divide people to distract from the fact that they are shutting down the government.
Americans are struggling to pay their health care bills. That was their initial foray into this negotiation. We thought it was absurd. We told them it was absurd, and now they...
Did he just say that Republicans think it's absurd that people are struggling to pay for health care? That explains a lot.
Coming here is saying that if you don't give us everything that we want, we're going to shut down the government.
That's not what they said. That's not what they said. They said, let's have a negotiation and come to an agreement.
I think that's preposterous. We think it's totally unacceptable, and we think the American people are going to suffer because these guys won't do the right thing. Now, I want to make one final point here. You will hear a lot from Senate Democrats, from House Democrats about the fact that American health care policy is broken. Well, we know that American health care policy is broken. We've been trying to fix it for the 8 months that we've...
What have they done? What have they done? They say they've been trying to fix it for the last 8 months. What exactly have they done? Name one healthcare policy that they've gotten through Congress that tries to fix anything. The only thing they've done is try to take healthcare away from 20 million people. That's not a fix. That's making things worse.
Been in office, but every single thing that they accuse about being broken about American healthcare is policy that Democrats have supported for the past decade.
Not true. Not true, not true, not true.
So if they want to talk about how to fix American healthcare policy, let's do it. The Speaker would love to do it. The Senate Majority...
Let's have a conversation about that. Let's have it right now, before everybody's healthcare premiums go up by thousands of dollars a year. How's that?
Would love to do it. Let's work on it together, but let's do it in the context of an open government that's providing essential services to the American people. That's all that we're proposing to do, and the fact that they refuse to do that shows how unreasonable their position is.
Oh man, Anytime anybody comes out and starts talking about how unreasonable somebody is after they just called an entire part of the country responsible for political violence and domestic terrorism, they don't have a leg to stand on here. That's a weak argument. What Vance offered was a completely weak argument that doesn't deliver anything. He offered no rationale, and you'll notice he never talked about the HCA subsidies and the price increases because they don't want to put the subsidies back. Republicans are trying to raise your, mine, everyone's healthcare expense and make sure that fewer people have health insurance. That's what this is about. The meeting was a disaster. It was always going to be a fraud because Republicans aren't serious. They aren't going to come to the table. They're willing to shut down the government to raise your health insurance premium than they are to cut a deal. And by the way, what Democrats are asking for is permanent subsidies. I think that's a negotiating point. I think they would probably take subsidies guaranteed through the 2020 election. And if you're Republicans, you should run to that deal, not walk, because they haven't learned their lesson yet. Every time the party in power is up against healthcare in an election, they get crushed. It happened with the original Obamacare midterm election when Obama was president. It happened in 2018 after Republicans tried to repeal Obamacare. And it's getting set to happen again in 2026. This is a disaster for Republicans. The administration is being completely foolish and stubborn. They're shutting down the government because they want you to pay more for your health insurance. I'm Jason Eastley. I write for Politicus USA. I write for the Daily with Sarah Jones. You can find me on both places. Please subscribe to each. They're great publications. They're fabulous. Please also follow us. Follow us on TikTok at Politicus USA. Follow us. Follow us on YouTube. Subscribe and like and follow our YouTube channel, Politicus USA. Until next time, when we're going to have a lot more to say about this shutdown, please take care of yourself and take care of each other.